Hello, everyone. As Julian said, I'm Nate Heinrich. I'm a product manager here at New Relic. And I'll be talking to you today about the incident lifecycle at New Relic. It's actually something that our engineering team at New Relic thinks a lot about. It's very thoughtful about it. And we invest a lot of time and energy into it. And I thought it would be worth sharing with you today, because it's not a topic we actually talk a lot about. This is our safe harbor slide. So I'm going to transport you back about 2.5 years ago. This is my desk on my first day at New Relic. And it wasn't long after this that I began wandering the offices of New Relic, and I began to notice that New Relic really thinks a lot about the incident lifecycle as a whole, especially service quality. And I began seeing these signs around. And back then, I didn't really know what the term chat ops meant, but that's essentially what this was. This was a way to democratize the creation of incidents. And if you saw something, you felt empowered to say something. And this was the beginning. And over the next 2.5 years, I saw a ton of investment and iteration in how we think about our incident lifecycle. And I can say today with confidence that New Relic has kind of crossed over this line where I would consider it achieving an amazing incident lifecycle. And so as you look at this picture, this is a rare picture of a Sev1 outage. And I was able to capture it kind of mid-incident. And what you can see here is we've got 6 engineers, 6 developers responding to service quality issues with code that they wrote and the services that they're responsible for. They're highly organized, excellent communication is occurring, and they're well orchestrated. And as Aaron can kind of show, that even during mid-incident, although we take it very seriously, that the stress is relatively low. Either that or he's mid-table flip. I'm pretty sure he's smiling, though. So I'm saying that we've kind of achieved this amazing incident lifecycle. How can I classify New Relic as it's kind of moving into that mode? I'm going to try and draw a little bit of a gap for you. And some of my experience can kind of help understand what an amazing looks like as well. So I'm a former web developer and system administrator. I've wrote applications and had responsibility for servers, those applications, even phone systems that were business critical, and have worked on small teams as well as being kind of the one-man show, and know what it's like to fix problems while trying to communicate to the business what's going on, trying to work through problems with subpar monitoring tools and grepping through logs to try and find out what the problem actually is, as well as participating in what I would call blameful retrospectives with lots of finger pointing and all the unamazing things that come from those types of meetings. In addition to that, I'm also in an interesting position as a product manager at New Relic who focuses primarily these days on our operational capabilities. So I have been working very hard on our new Alerts beta product that's going to be coming out soon. And in that mode, I have a lot of conversations with customers, prospects, and others in the industry about what it's like for them to respond to service quality issues. And so here's 2 common conversations I'm having even today. And the first one I would classify as the sysadmin conversation. And this is really the opposite of what Gene Kim and Patrick Lightbody have been saying for years, which is give the dev the pagers. And it goes something like this. You got sysadmins that run infrastructure, and they've got applications running on those servers. Well, they're the ones getting woken up in the middle of the night for problems with those applications, but they didn't write them. All they can really do is make sure the server's healthy, maybe restart the application, and if that doesn't work, then they got to find somebody else. But working in that mode, getting woken up in the middle of the night for something that isn't your fault, pretty unamazing. The second conversation kind of goes back to what Lou was saying, where modern businesses today are software businesses. If you're communicating with your customers in any way, shape, or form, in a meaningful way, it's going to be through technology. And because of that, you are now kind of a software company. But these companies I'm having these conversations with, it hasn't quite sunk in yet. So they still see technology as a cost center rather than a differentiator. And because of that, the investment in high-quality tools for quick root cause diagnostics, as well as speed to deploy and getting code out there, is lower priority. The value isn't quite seen. So that's kind of the gap, right? A lot of businesses today kind of are in that mode. I think New Relic's doing a great job, so I thought it'd be worthwhile to talk about some of the things we do. So as I surveyed all the energy that we've put into investing in our incident lifecycle, I tried to categorize it a bit, make sense of it. So I've come to kind of 3 areas where you can invest to kind of get to that awesome level. So let's start with the incident timeline. Pretty standard. But there's a lot of energy going into when something breaks to when you fix it. But I think there's 3 areas that you need to be conscious of and you need to invest in. The first is before root cause even occurs or is introduced into the system. What I would call culture. This is something you can invest in and you can make better. And that it really is about your behaviors and beliefs about building, deploying, and running software. You can invest in this and make it better. The second category is the one that I think we're all familiar with, but I would like to categorize it as the routines that we can invest in. Because as you're in the middle of an incident, you need to have processes in place, but I like to classify them as routines because you need to be building habits. You need to be building those neural pathways so that during an outage or service quality issue, you need to use the majority of your cognitive abilities to solve the problem, not run the process. And lastly is priority. So we all do activities after resolution. You can invest in the importance you put on those activities and the action items that come out of them. So at this point, while you kind of have that high-level construct in mind, let's think about why. I've noticed that a lot of investments kind of in that center area, but not on the ends. And I've got a hypothesis as to why, and it has to do with the way our brains work. And Daniel Gilbert, he's a psychology professor at Harvard, kind of looking at why humans aren't reacting to global warming, has come up with the 4 I's of the reasons why our brain is triggered to react to threats. And really, if a threat doesn't violate one of the 4 I's, then we're not going to react. So when you think about how software fails, it doesn't fail intentionally. The code we write is getting executed as we wrote it, so we're really the only ones to blame. It's not imminent, or we don't react to imminent threats where if the code is working in production today and it will probably be working in production tomorrow and it won't ruin your night to just kind of put it off one more day, we're really good at sweeping those under the rug and procrastinating. As well as immoral, we've got these servers running code again, and it's just doing what we asked it to do. There are no immoral servers interpreting your code in a racist or prejudiced way to cause you to trigger your brain to react to those threats. And really, instantaneous is the only thing that kind of gets us moving. We're great at reacting to those alerts that come in affecting now, and we can react to those with resolve and get them solved. But if we get an alert for something that is going to happen in the future, again, sweep it under the rug. We'll take care of that later. So from here, I'm going to pivot into kind of one investment that I'm proud to say our engineering organization has made in each one of those categories to give you an idea of like how we spend our time and where we spend our time. So within the culture category, we've got this metal progression system. Again, culture is root cause and before. And we wanted to solve the problem of we purposely hire engineers from a wide variety of backgrounds. And when you come to work for New Relic, we build highly available systems that deal with lots of throughput. And to make sure that all the engineers have what they need to to build those highly available systems, it's non-trivial. That skill set is complex. So our engineering organization set aside some of the experts in this area and took all the things that you need to do to make a highly available system, service, or team, and just made some groups. Kind of create a nice, clear path for how to go through them. So I'll talk quickly about each one. So you start with level 1. Let's think of the birth of a service. That service needs to have basic monitoring, needs to have monitoring of some kind in place, has to have it. And then as that system or the service is, you think about it in the overall architecture of New Relic, you need to think about its risk matrix, the failure scenarios. As it's in there, if it has service quality issues, what's going to happen? And we just use a simple risk matrix. We work with an architect or an expert to determine, all of the risks and where they land on this matrix by impact and likelihood. Then level 2 is all about that service is now in a place where the team has the data it needs to engage early and solve problems as soon as they crop up. And then level 3 means that all those high impact, high likelihood risks have been completely mitigated, and that recurring game days by the team on that service are happening so that you're introducing those failure scenarios into the system in pre-prod or prod, and you're documenting what happens when you introduce them so that you know what's going to happen. And then lastly is kind of level 4. Some of the things that could happen to that service are predictable, and that the service itself is able to, without human intervention, be able to mitigate some of those things. So lots of throughput comes in, it auto-scales, things like that. And so what this did was create a simple, clear path for our teams to move through so that they can see where all of their services are. You can kind of get these abstract metals and levels to be able to tell where they stand as a team with all the services that they're responsible for. We've got over 24 engineering teams, some of them responsible for a dozen or more services. And so once you have this map, it helps you understand where you are in relationship to all of your services, as well as in aggregate, you can compare yourself to other teams. And if where you stand compared to the people that depend on you doesn't match, it's helpful. It kind of makes that much more clear. All right, so moving into routines. So again, this is that area when you've identified a problem and you need to mitigate and resolve it. So again, think about the word routine. Needs to be easy, needs to be consistent. We wanted to make sure that communication was flowing frequently and consistently, and that we have this idea of roles within an incident. We've got this incident commander, the tech lead, and the communication lead, and they all kind of work together, but sometimes overlapping with some people need to go home, you need to pass the torch to somebody else, and we need to make sure that was explicit. So we automated it. Using Hubot, which is a GitHub repo that you can deploy, you can kind of connect that automation technology to your chat client, as well as any internal tools to make this a lot easier. So let's walk through what it's like to receive an alert. Do some quick investigation. If this is a service quality issue that needs attention immediately, you need to know 2 things at New Relic. You jump into an emergency room in HipChat, and you need to know 1 command. This is the list of commands that our nerd incident automation robot knows. But you just type in /911, I see me. That means make me the incident commander and start an incident. This is all within HipChat. So you start the incident, and it says, hey, you should probably set the status, the severity, and it kind of notifies the room. At that point, it does one thing, which is super simple, but yet very effective for lowering stress and making sure communication is flowing frequently and consistently. And it's that once you have a role of an incident commander, you can then have this robot ping him every 10 minutes and say, hey, it's time for a status update. So when you know that there's always going to be a status update happening every 10 minutes, everybody just kind of chills out. right? You can look back in the history, see the previous statuses, as well as waiting for the next one. So anybody can jump into this room and know what's going on when it's happening. So then you can kind of clean up, say, incident's over, tells you how long it was, and then those statuses that you set, we push those out into an internal retro tool we have, and it ends up being an excellent event log of the incident itself. So you can use those in those retrospectives you have to recall exactly what you were doing when you were doing it. So that's our nerd extension to Hubot. And it helps us, again, democratize incident creation, helps us manage roles during incidents, and you get those statuses kind of flowing very frequently. So priority. Again, that's the activities you do and the action items that come out of them and how you can invest in the importance you put on them. So we have these blameless retrospectives, which are excellent, and we have great action items coming out of them, but we had a hard time kind of prioritizing them and making sure that they were flowing back into the system or service that had the incident and getting those code fixes in. As well as in those retros, we always come up with great long-term objectives of things that would help us in the future and just generally make the system better. But those are having a hard time competing with things like features we want to deliver to all of you. So we solved this with a couple of simple policies within the engineering organization. So if a system or service has a problem with quality, and in the retro, you identify some action items that would have prevented that from happening, those are the only things that can make their way into the master branch before any feature work. So we got to plug those holes as quickly as possible. That's a policy we have. So the do not repeat incident policy. So then those larger items, we want to move this service to use, database B versus database A. It'll probably take us a month or two. Well, it's more forward thinking and probably the right thing to do. But what we were doing is we just weren't tracking it in the same places that we were with our features. We were asking our engineering teams and managers to kind of handle that behind the scenes. So like, for instance, myself as a product manager, I was always thinking about features, our roadmap for features. But reliability is a feature. We need to start tracking those things on the same page so they can compete with the features we want to deliver. So this is an example of a roadmap where previously it would just be the lavender stuff, all the features we want to deliver, but just simply putting the reliability work that's more long-term, holistic in the same place, on the same page, helps the product manager and the engineering manager of the team kind of work together to make sure that this system and service is going to be scaled out in the best way possible. So I'm just kind of scratching the surface here on all of the things that I investigated within how we've invested in our incident lifecycle. Here's a handful of things that I found. So if any of these things are of interest to you to talk about, I'm happy to talk to you about them afterwards. But what I would leave you with as a final thought is that as I looked at all of how we were investing and kind of identified those categories, it became very clear that you need to invest in all three. You can't just invest in your culture, because then it just becomes an academic exercise. You can't just invest in your routines, because then you're just getting really good at responding to the same problems over and over again. So with that, I hope you learned something new or useful, and that I challenge you all to go forth and innovate on your incident lifecycle. Thank you.